Welcome to another episode of Titan PI TV, where we're looking at the inside workings of a live operational investigation agency, that being here Titan in Derby. I am your host and Managing Director of Titan Private Investigation Limited, Simon Henson. If you prefer to listen to podcasts, you can download Titan PI TV podcasts wherever you download your podcasts. So following on from last week's episode, where we looked at the selection procedure and what happens at the courses that they have to go on, a police surveillance operative has to go on, we thought it was befitting for this week to look at how the police or a public body would gain authority to follow somebody, what that process is, who might authorise it, and also how that piece of regulation or act might affect a private investigator. So, the RIPA, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000. It passed its parliamentary passage in July 2000 under a Labour government, Labour-Blair government, and it was introduced to regulate the manner in which public bodies may conduct surveillance and assess a person's electronic communications. So first of all, what is a public body? A public body is any body or company which is funded by the public purse. So it might be a council, clearly funded by the public purse. They have a government budget. So they might approach a private investigator to look into fly tipping. We might use cameras, static cameras, or we might use a physical surveillance team if we know when it's happening. That is clearly funded by the public purse and will need RIPA authority. A housing association. A housing association might want us to look at antisocial behaviour. A housing association is funded by the public purse. They will need RIPA authority for us to do that. The NHS. The NHS might contact us because a nurse or a doctor has unnecessary absence or inappropriate absences. For us to follow them during the working day when they're on the sick, once again, funded by the public purse. We would have to have a RIPA authority in place before we can act. Trading standards might ask us to look at the graphology or the handwriting analysis of an individual who is suspected of fraudulent behaviour. Once again, trading standards, they are funded by the public purse. They will need to gain a RIPA authority. The police, if they want to follow somebody, they are funded by the public purse. They will need to get a RIPA authority to be able to follow someone. So, the general rule, if a private investigator is instructed by any body which is funded by the public purse, they need to get a RIPA authority. If a public body wants to do it internally, once again, because they're funded by the public purse, they will need to get authority under the RIPA Act 2000. So let's look at the three parts of this act. Part 1 looks at communications. This relates to phones. So in the private industry, we don't touch phones. It's illegal. You'll get imprisoned. There are elements of time when it is legal, but generally we stay away from phones. Part 1, nothing to do with the private sector. Part 2, this is us. This is surveillance. This is looking at CHISs, covert human intelligence sources. And part 3 is electronic data. So you're looking at the interception of emails. Once again, means prison. We don't do it. Part 3 isn't relevant. So the only part that is relevant to us is part 2. And part 2 looks at directed and intrusive surveillance. It also looks at CHISs, that covert human intelligence source, which is effectively an informant. So let's look at directed first. Directed is a pre-planned surveillance imposed on an individual or a group of people. So let's go back to the NHS example. A nurse or a doctor's on the sick. Absenteeism. That would be directed upon a person. So that would be a directed surveillance. Intrusive. Intrusive surveillance. This is when surveillance is inside a vehicle or a property. So an example of that could be a camera is in a residential property or a listening device in a vehicle. When we look at CHISs, that covert human intelligence source, or an informant, this could be where the council has asked us to look at antisocial behaviour. We deploy. We would therefore need, in those circumstances, for the council to have a RIPA authority. So what I'm saying here is, if you are instructed as a private investigator to investigate anybody by any body or a company which is funded by the public purse, you need to make sure a RIPA authority is in place. So who can authorise RIPA authorities? So if it's the council and we're looking at directed surveillance, so we are following one person, it's going to be the chief exec, the top guy or woman. If it's the police, it will be a superintendent. It can be given set for 72 hours orally if it's working on intelligence and it's immediate, or if it's written, it lasts 3 months. For intrusive behaviour, intrusive surveillance, then it's the chief constable. It could be done by the assistant chief constable, and once again, it can be done orally, working on intelligence, which is an ever-changing picture, which is rapid, for 72 hours, or written for 3 months. So we now know that RIPA, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, only applies to public bodies or when we're instructed by a public body. However, at Titan, we take RIPA Act in the spirit it is intended. So when we have an individual or a client contact us, we fill out on our case management system a number of details about them, their objective, what we want to achieve, what information we have gained throughout the operation, what date we've deleted it, and if we haven't, why we haven't, and what is the date for reviewing that. But we also look at the legitimate interest assessment. So is it legal? Is there a less intrusive way that we can fulfill this objective? And if the answer is no, then we will carry on with the method that we have chosen. But we will look at necessity, proportionality, and collateral intrusion. So is it necessary? Is it proportionate to what we want to achieve? And is the collateral intrusion? So collateral intrusion would be, are we gaining information on other people, and can that be limited? So an example of that might be we're instructed by an insurance company to gain imagery of an individual in regards to a claim that's going through, and it's thought that yes, they've had their accident, but are their injuries in keeping with what they are saying? So we might look at them. If we do look at them and they live in an apartment and there's a communal door, we need to look at that collateral intrusion. So do we record everybody coming out of that door? Because then we're getting personal information on other people. So we always have to have in the back of our mind, is it necessary? Is it proportionate? And are we getting any collateral intrusion of other people's lives? So that, in a nutshell, is RIPA. I hope it's cleared up some areas, because people think that human rights and RIPA Act apply to private investigators. 9 out of 10 times it doesn't, but if we are instructed by a public body who is funded by the public purse, then yes, it does. So next week, what's coming up? Next week we are going to be looking at how to detect a surveillance team, what I would personally look at to detect a surveillance team. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give us a thumbs up. As always, if you don't want to miss future episodes, please subscribe to the channel. Till next time, keep safe.